Hey, this is Chris. How you doing this morning? It's kind of an overcast day here in North Carolina, but it is warm, 70 degrees according to my car thermometer. Put down the one I need to make sure the fan's off so it doesn't make noise. So I was going to do a review. Watched a really good miniseries. Yeah, my little cow there. Really good mini-series about George Washington. It's maybe it was 4 part, I can't remember. Watched it the other day and watched it all day long. So, now we have that rattling sound in the back. So, I'll speak up. It's a History Channel production. I think it's on Hulu right now, though. I always approach History Channel productions or anything on the History Channel with a certain amount of trepidation because, in my experience, they have not always been the best people at telling accurate stories. But I was pleased to find that this was a very good account of Washington's life. They made it kind of sound like nobody knew that he ever made a mistake, or I don't know. They had this presupposition, I think, that most people think that Washington was some kind of, almost a god and never did anything wrong and this and that. But, if you actually know your history, you know that already. He was just a guy. I mean, an exceptional guy, an exceptional human being, someone who had very deep convictions about how this country was to be formed and how it was supposed to work. He sacrificed a great deal personally. And so did Martha, by the way, because George was hardly ever there during the Revolutionary War. And so, but he just, it was a good show. It starts with his first command in a Virginia, I don't know if it was called a militia, but it was a colonial military unit. And you can kind of see the seeds of the American Revolution in the fact that the British Army did not allow colonists to be regular soldiers, and so he was always, he was in command, but he was in command of a unit that was made up of just, militia rather than regular British soldiers. And so you can see that the British attitude towards colonists was already one of, you're not going to be part of this. You're not going to be part of Britain. You can have your own colony, but you're not going to be part of our army. And so that was, and of course that became, his ambition was to be in the British Army, was to get a commission. That's what he wanted. And it soon became apparent, after, well, it didn't soon. I mean, it took several years, but finally he resigned when the British sent British officers to take over command of even the colonial forces. Because before that, they'd been kind of separate, operating under separate commands. And so, tells his experience about the French and Indian War, kind of implies that he started it. I think the circumstances surrounding the French and Indian War, how it started, a little bit too complex to just say, well, this guy started it. I mean, he did make a mistake. He killed the wrong guy, but the wrong French guy. Anyway, it was supposedly on a diplomatic mission. I don't know how he was supposed to know that, but be that as it may. And it just shows his experiences in the Virginia militia, and then his retirement, and then, he went back to Mount Vernon for quite a while, like maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10 years. Got married to Martha. She had a lot of land, so she's the one who provided the land, and he provided the know-how. He started rotating crops, because what I did not realize is that the American planters were really getting screwed over by the British merchants. I mean, they only had one place to sell their tobacco, and that was in Britain. They weren't allowed, that was just the way it worked. And so they were getting fleeced at both ends. They were getting fleeced on the cost to get it over there. They were getting fleeced on the cost to sell it. And they were getting fleeced on the money that they got when they sold it, and so it was kind of ridiculous. So I did not know that part, that the colonies were really being economically subjugated, especially like the planter class was. So then we get into the seeds of the Revolutionary War, and they spend a lot of time on the Battle of Trenton, which it was an important battle, but it wasn't really a pivotal battle. I think it was important at the time, but it turned strategically or tactically, it really didn't make much difference to anything. And I was really disappointed that they talked about Valley Forge, but they really didn't talk about how important it was. They didn't talk about how the military was hardened and toughened during that time. They didn't talk about von Steuben coming and instilling discipline into the troops. And they in particular didn't talk about the Battle of Monmouth, which is just it is the pivotal battle of the Revolutionary War in terms of the things that Washington was able to accomplish, because after that battle, after the Americans showed that they could go toe-to-toe with the British and actually hold the field, because the English did not stay to fight the next day. They skulked back into New York, or maybe it was Philadelphia, and then on to New York. But the British never again once mounted an offensive anywhere near Washington. It really didn't mount an offensive anywhere in the northern half of the colonies. They decided on their southern strategy, which was to start in Charleston and work up and try to subjugate South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina. And that was another thing that was disappointing to me. They didn't spend hardly any time on Nathaniel Greene, who was the quartermaster of the army under Washington, and then was sent to the command to take over the Southern Command after Horatio Gates got his butt kicked at Camden. And so it kind of glossed over all that. It's just all of a sudden we have Cornwallis heading to Yorktown with no historical context as to why he went to Yorktown. And it was because he had gotten beaten so badly. He hadn't gotten beaten, but he had been bled to death of men and material and resources. And he could no longer operate as an independent army in that part of the country. Nathaniel Greene never actually won a battle, but managed, and of course, much like Washington won very few battles. But they just wore the British out, and that's what Greene did, and that's why they ended up at Yorktown. So they spent a little time on Yorktown, and then spend a little time on events after the war, the Constitution. Not really a whole lot of time talking about it. Didn't really talk about. See, it's like it was accurate in what it portrayed, but they left out quite a few things. I thought, it would have been worth it to make the show another 2 hours longer if that's what it would have taken to show these events, because they kind of leave out a lot of things that really give you a clear picture of the totality of the American Revolution and the formation of the Constitution. And so, I guess they made an editorial decision, and that's fine. I mean, but as far as the movie goes, it's a good portrayal. So that it's got that going for it. I just wish it had been a little bit more of a full story rather than it was really thumbnail. It was really kind of thin in places. If you know your history, if you know your American Revolutionary history, then you'll understand what I'm talking about. If you don't know anything, well, heck, it's way better than what you know now, because if you don't know anything, then at least you'll get some sense of who the guy was. So it talks about his presidency. He talks, he was just kind of a tired guy when he took the oath of office for a second term. I mean, he was worn out. And, at the end of his presidency, he went home to Mount Vernon, and unfortunately, he only had another 2.5 years with Martha before he contracted some sort of respiratory disease, and unfortunately, he died because, it's one of those things. He got an infection, saying if they just had some antibiotics, he would have been okay, but the antibiotics weren't around yet, and so he died, and so that was sad, he gets to that point in his life, he served his country, and it's time to relax, and he doesn't get time to relax. Not really. He gets 2.5 years, and then he's gone. And so that was sad. It's too bad that he didn't have more time to enjoy really the fruits of his labor. Although, you think politics is nasty now. It was really nothing like it was back then. I mean, if you think Trump is abrasive, of course, now Washington was not abrasive, but there were a lot of people who criticized him who were that abrasive, and he just held himself above the fray the best he could, and set an example in spite of it could have been easy. He could have just flying off the handle and said, okay, fine, I quit, but he set the example. The most important of which, of course, was only serving 2 terms and then saying, okay, I'm done. It's time for somebody else to come take care of me. It's like, if it doesn't survive me, it's not worth surviving. He didn't say that, but that's really the reality of it. So. Anyway, I recommend it. It's just called Washington, produced by the History Channel. Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is a presidential historian of some sort or another. I don't know if she works in the Library of Congress. I'm not sure exactly what her full title is, but she did a good job with it. She picked out some good people who, it was amazingly, so I forgot to mention, it's kind of like half documentary, half reenactment, and so there's a lot of present day political figures that are commenting on what the story is and who Lincoln, who Washington was, and so. One of the better, actually, and I don't really, care for him a whole lot, but Bill Clinton did a really good job in his comment on some of his commentary. I was really kind of surprised, to be honest with you. Really kind of displayed a depth of knowledge of history that I didn't. Nothing had prepared me for that, right? Colin Powell was there, had a few comments. Had a couple black historians that were on there, and they touched on the slavery thing, and that's fair because he owned slaves, but nobody bashed him for it really, and it was just a good, I think it was a good balanced story, just a little bit thin in parts. So I would recommend it. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below. Like and subscribe. We appreciate it when you do. We'll see you on the next historical video.